With that said, I've got a little bio here. Kate is the horticultural extension agent for Texas A&M Ag Life Extension in Williamson County. Kate has 13 years of experience with Texas A&M with Ag Life Extension. Hold it, I'm doing two things at once here. Hold on. Okay, sorry. Let me get these people in here. Never break up my concentration. Serving as the county extension agent in Williamson and how do you pronounce that? Bosque counties?
Bosque. Mm-hmm.
Bosque County as a program coordinator. And also she is a certified plant nerd and loves to read and cook in her spare time if she has any. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate. And I don't know if anybody is as excited as I am to learn how to get my Bermuda grass from brown to green. Kate, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so y'all can see. I've got a presentation, and I admit that I get excited talking about Bermuda grass and lawns, and so I tend to just talk and talk, but I'll try to leave plenty of time for your questions. I asked for at least 2 hours to speak to you, but Gary said that was a no-go. So I'll keep it shorter tonight. But I want to talk about timing in our lawns. That's one of the more important things. So I'm going to talk about timing for irrigation, for fertilizer, and for weed control. And then I'll also try to hit on some of what you'll probably see this spring because of the winter weather event, as we like to call it. Because I think we're going to potentially see some damage. Hopefully not in Bermuda grass. Y'all are lucky. It's those St. Augustine folks who are going to see some issues. But I'm going to start off with talking about weed control. That's usually what I get a lot of questions on, is weeds in our turf grass. And everybody always wants to put out some pre-emergent or some weed and feed to take care of that. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is that the best sort of weed control is to have a good, healthy turf grass. So if we can keep that Bermuda grass in good condition, it spreads out and it gets so thick that it prevents weeds from coming up. So that's our goal. But with that, it doesn't always work out the way we want it. Sometimes we have shade or damage from freezes or disease or whatever, and our turf grass thins out and we start to get weeds. So I will say that nature does not like a bare spot in the ground. So if you have any sort of bare soil, it's going to try to grow something to cover it up. And so your job is to try to grow good grass so that you don't have weeds coming up in those problems areas. The other thing I'd say is if you do have weeds, if they're not too bad, I think Gary said most of y'all you're in a newer neighborhood, so you probably had sod laid down. A good weed control program right now might just be you getting outside and pulling weeds. If they're not too thick, it's good to get a little sunshine, some vitamin D, some exercise, get outside and pull those weeds. But if you've got a bigger problem with weeds, you can go ahead and we'll talk some about herbicides. The first thing you need to know though about weeds is what is your weed, and we've got to know that before we can ever move into a herbicide program. So there are 3 main types of weeds. The first one is a broadleaf, and this is going to be a good example of that you might be seeing right now is henbit. It's got those little purple flowers on it. That's a cool season weed that pops up. So broadleaf plants have net-like veins with different leaf shapes. And a broadleaf, that's going to be anything from a tree to most of our shrubs and landscape plants to weeds. And then we have grassy weeds. So a grass is a plant that's going to have parallel leaf veins with long, slender leaves. You might be seeing annual bluegrass, also known as Poa annua. That's a pretty pesky weed. I struggle with Dallas grass in my weed. Those are going to be grasses. And then sedge. All of you have probably come across sedge at some point in your life. It's interesting. It looks a lot like a grass. It's got those parallel leaf veins, but it's got, if you did a cross section of the stem, you would have a triangular shape. So I've got some pictures right here. We've got the broadleaf weeds here on the left. You can see the net-like veins and the different leaf shapes. And then here in the middle, we've got grasses. These two middle pictures with their parallel leaf veins. This looks like a Bermuda grass. And then over here, we've got sedge. And you can see that triangular shaped stem. If you were to pull up some sedge, you can feel that those corners of the triangles with your fingers. So that's how you know you're dealing with a sedge. So it's important to know which kind of weed you have, because different herbicides will target different weeds. So if we're looking at pre-emergent control of weeds, and that's one of the best ways to control them is to get there before they really start to grow. And so this is a herbicide that's going to go out. A lot of times it's a granule herbicide that you would put out with a spreader, water it in really well, and then it's going to sit on top of the soil. And as weeds start to germinate, it kills them. In a normal year, I would tell you that now is a good time to put out your pre-emergent herbicide, because we want to get it out before those weeds start germinating. We would put it out right now for warm season weeds that will start germinating this spring and be really active in the summer, to try to get them before they start. And then we apply a pre-emergent herbicide again, starting usually the last week of August into early September for our cool season weeds. And that may seem really early to try to put, that we're still sweating and at the end of August and early September here in Texas. But I can tell you that I started seeing henbit germinate at the end of September last year. Crabgrass starts, we just get all these weeds that start germinating, and we don't really notice because they're so small. But usually starting mid-February is when we want to put out pre-emergent for our warm season weeds, and then end of August into early September for our cool season weeds. This is really based on soil temperature more than the air temperature, but in general, those are good guidelines for it. So I mentioned that we need a specific project or product for a specific weed, so I'll get into that in just a second. But do you know that typically in a normal year, we would put pre-emergent down right now and then again in 100 days to get anything that may be germinating late. So it might require a second application. And again, water it in with about 1/2 inch of water. Read the label on that package. That's going to tell you exactly how much you need to water in, and I would not depend on rainfall. Never fails that we either don't get enough rain to really do any good, or we get a gully washer and all of your pre-emergent herbicide goes down the drain. So don't count on rainfall. Use that irrigation system that you've got. And again, pre-emergent is going to control germinating seeds. Now, I will tell you, well, here's a good picture. So you can kind of see that the pre-emergent's going to be right here at the soil surface, which hopefully is where those weed seeds are, and it's going to prevent them from coming up. I've got a list here. This is just a very short list. There are a lot more products available. These are all of the active ingredients in pre-emergent herbicides. So typically we would recommend like pendimethalin or prodiamine for your grassy weeds. You can find that in like the Scott's Halts, crabgrass preventer, or barricade. Now, here's my one caveat to this for this year. I was on a call with some of our AgriLife turf specialists talking about freeze damage, and we are concerned about winter kill this year because of the deep freeze. Bermuda grass, we probably won't see as much, if any, damage. St. Augustine is really where we're going to see it, but I will tell you that these pre-emergent herbicides, the pendimethalin, prodiamine, dithiopyr, these are all root inhibiting herbicides, so they're going to keep the roots from growing. and they could potentially increase the damage that we're seeing from winter kill. So this year, their recommendation was to maybe look for other options of weed control, such as mechanical. You know, when I say mechanical, that's a fancy word for going out to pick your weeds, pull them up yourself. But there is a little bit of concern about using pre-emergent out this year because of the severe freeze that we had. Now, if you've already put it out, don't panic. Just wait and see what happens. But if you hadn't put it out yet, you might not want to do that this year. Okay, if you've already got weeds up, or if you had some that came up, even though you put out pre-emergent, there are some post-emergent weed control chemicals. Again, you can also pull your weeds, but there are some things that you can do after they've already come up. And I will say that you've got to be a lot more careful if you're trying to treat weeds in a lawn that have already come up, because a lot of our herbicides might do some damage to your turf. We've also got a lot of grassy weeds that we don't have good post-emergent products for on the market for homeowners anymore. And so what I do when I get real frustrated with Dallas grass is I'll spot treat it with something like glyphosate that will kill it. It will damage the grass right next to it if that herbicide gets on it, but I know that grass will fill in and I get tired of dealing with Dallas grass. So you can do some spot treatments with your post-emergent weed control. Here's a list of those. So one that you might want to be careful on, especially if you had a St. Augustine lawn or know someone is 2,4-D, that could, because of the winter damage, that grass is going to be a little bit more sensitive to it. So be careful with that. But you can use for broadleaf weeds 2,4-D, dicamba. Those both work really well. They're in a product called Weed Be Gone. If you've got problems with sedge, I would recommend the chemical imazaquin. That's right here in the middle, and that is in several different products. There's a company called Image that has a sedge killer. There are several different products that will kill sedges, but imazaquin is that active ingredient. This is that small print on the front of the bottle that you need to look for. And I've got, I'll send some information out to Gary. I've got some really good publications that have these lists in them. So don't worry about trying to write it down from the slides tonight. Okay, so I'm gonna jump in from, that was a very quick thing on weed control. The last thing I would say is make sure you read the label on the bag and put out the appropriate amount. Generally, they're going to recommend so many pounds per 1,000 square feet. So you might have to do some math on the size of your lot and make sure that you use the right amount of herbicide, whether it's pre-emergent or post-emergent. Putting out more doesn't make it better. And you also, putting out less doesn't mean you're like saving the environment. It just means you're probably not going to kill the weed. You might help it develop herbicide resistance, and you've just wasted your money. So follow those label instructions to mix up the right amounts and put it out on your lawn. So, okay, I'm going to jump into fertilizing. This is getting nutrients back into the soil so that our lawns can use it. I will say that AgriLife Extension does not recommend that you use weed and feed products. Those mix fertilizer and herbicides together, but I told you that we would typically put out a pre-emergent herbicide. Right now, we do not need to fertilize until maybe mid-April. The good rule of thumb is don't fertilize until you've had to mow active grass growth 2 times. That's when we would fertilize, because we don't want to put nutrients out until that grass is actively growing and actually needs to be fed. Okay, So a question I get a lot is what kind of fertilizer should I put out? And I give probably one of my favorite answers is, well, it depends. What kind of grass do you have? Um, how big is your lawn? What kind of traffic does it get? You know, a football field is going to need a lot more fertilizer than maybe a lawn that only gets a couple people walking around on it. How big is your lawn? And then I would also say that the lawnmower is probably going to apply more fertilizer than you need to actually put out. A lawnmower, if you put your grass clippings back into the lawn, just take that bag off, that's going to supply a really great amount of nutrients back into your lawn. So use that. And then I would say, let's do a soil test. It's really hard to know how much fertilizer your lawn needs without testing the soil to see how much is already available. Typically, we are planning our fertilizer applications based on the nitrogen needs. That's what gets used up the fastest. It's a lot more volatile. And so we're going to make recommendations based on the amount of nitrogen that you need. I mentioned this already that we're going to do fertilizer on Bermuda lawns, typically late March. I would say maybe mid-April. Again, you want to mow 2 times on the active growth. And then you can do it about every 8 weeks if the lawn needs it, but stop fertilizing in October because we don't want to promote a lot of growth before your lawn gets into winter when it hopefully starts going dormant. Okay, timing is everything. That's the title of my presentation. And so I put this in here just to show you that when it's important for our warm season, which we have warm season turf grass down here in Texas. And so we want to fertilize in the spring when that turf grass is really starting to get growing. And we want to make sure that it's got plenty of nutrients to get it through the summer. And then we're going to taper off and not worry about it as much into the fall and winter because it's not going to be actively growing. Okay, I would say, again, just like your herbicides, too much of a good thing doesn't make it better. So we want to avoid over-fertilization. What happens is that if we fertilize too much, we'll promote a lot of this really big green growth on top, and the root system can't support it. So we want to balance our nutrients so that we have good healthy grass on top, but we're also supporting good root growth. If we have good root system like this, it's going to help that grass grow better through a hot, dry summer. It'll have better recuperation from drought, all kinds of things. So I would and reduce cold tolerance. So that's another good reason. Be careful about fertilizing. Maybe once or twice a summer, but again, take that soil test. That'll help you a lot to know how much fertilizer you need to put out. And we've got information on how to take a soil test and where to send it into the lab. And you can even include my name on there so that I can help you read the results once you get them and figure out how much fertilizer you need to put into your spreader. So, okay, how am I doing on? Pretty good on time. Last thing I wanted to talk about was irrigation. This is a big deal. Gary mentioned you have water ambassador in your neighborhood. That's great. They are a good resource for you. What I see a lot is that we really care about our lawns and want to take care of them. And in our hot summers, it seems like watering is going to be the best thing. Water is important, but I would say that we need to water deeply and infrequently. We want to try to train those roots to grow deep so that they can access water down farther in the soil. If we have a really shallow root system, you're going to have to water it a lot more frequently, and you'll use more water. So the idea is to try to conserve water by watering deeply and infrequently. So I've got a thing on here. This gets a little confusing, but it says try to water to a depth of 6 inches each time you water. That doesn't mean that you're putting out 6 inches of water. That means we want the water to be able to trickle down 6 inches into the soil. Again, that helps our roots to grow down deeper. I would recommend that you water 1 or 2 times per week in the summer when you're setting your systems. Just do it 2 times a week so that the grass isn't getting those shallow root systems because you're watering it every day. We want them to have to tough it out a little bit and go deeper down into the soil. So set them for 2 times a week. I know I live in the city of Georgetown. Last summer we were on water restrictions. You could only water 2 times a week. So that makes it easy to follow that rule. And then again, water deep and less frequently. So there's a really handy tool that Texas A&M has. It's called the Evapotranspiration Network. And this uses weather stations around the state. I pulled data that you can see from this last week. This is from the Round Rock Weather Station. And it tells you, one, how much rainfall we got. You can see that over here on the left-hand side. So we got 1.31 inches in the last week. But it also tells you how much water is lost through transpiration. And so that's, the grass is doing its normal thing, it's transpiring, and it's going to lose water that way. And so what we're trying to do by irrigating is to replace 60% of the water that is lost by evapotranspiration. And so you can go online to this texaset.tamu.edu. You can look at this data, and then it's got a calculator down there where you can put in how much sun you have, what kind of grass you have, and it'll tell you how much you should water in that particular week to make up for evapotranspiration. So it's a pretty cool tool, and this helps you know when you actually need to water. If we've got a good rain event, you probably don't need to water, and this is a good thing to kind of let you know how much you need to water and how frequently. We generally recommend too that you would turn off your irrigation system when the grass is not actively growing. So it's certainly not actively growing right now. Our warm season lawns don't need irrigation most of the time during the winter months. Now, I will say that I had some questions about that late in the fall, like in November. And, during that time, it was very dry. We hadn't had much rain at all. And it's not a bad thing to water occasionally when it's really dry in the winter. But for the most part, winter's when we get some rain, so you don't need to water. Okay, we also recommend that you water early in the morning. Let's see if it'll play. Got a little. Nope, it's not going to play. But watering early in the morning is going to help keep the water from evaporating off. It also will help the leaf blades to dry out during the day so that we don't have potential disease issues from the water just sitting on the grass. One thing I would recommend is that you monitor your irrigation system. Certainly after this freeze, you need to check and see if there are any broken heads or pipes. We've got a video for some quick fixes, but you can also call your water ambassador and they can help you kind of work through that, or call your irrigation company to get those things fixed. But I would recommend that you take some time to check that, especially this year once you start getting your irrigation system turned back on. The other thing that I would recommend is to learn how much water your system is actually putting out. Sometimes the sprinkler heads aren't putting out water evenly, and so we recommend that you do a test. These are catch cans that are out on the lawn, but you can also use tuna fish cans or whatever. Set those out as little mini rain gauges all around and run your system for a certain amount of time, say 5 minutes, and then see how much water you get. That'll help you. You can kind of do the math and figure out, how long it's going to take to put out ½ an inch of water or whatever you're going for that week. Typically in the summer, we're going to recommend that you irrigate 1 inch to 1.5 inches per week. And so if your system runs for 10 minutes and you get ½ of an inch, you would need to run it 3 times during the week to get 1.5 inches. Okay, I would also recommend the cycle soak method. So we're going to use that method with the cans to figure out how much water is coming out of our system. And then when we set our irrigation system, we're going to water each station in short cycles instead of one long cycle. So if you need, say, 20 minutes a week to get your full 1.5 inches in the summertime when it's really hot, say you're going to water on Mondays and Thursdays. So on Monday, instead of a full 10-minute cycle, you would do it in 2 5-minute cycles, or maybe even 3-minute cycles, and you let that water trickle down about an hour, and then you run it for 3 minutes again. So this is going to allow that water to really get down deeper into the soil. Research has shown that a lot of times if we just run it for 10 or 15 minutes or however long your cycle is, that there will be a lot of runoff and we lose a lot of water that way. So cycle soak lets it run for a short period of time, take a break, let the water get into the soil, pulse it again for another short cycle, and you can do that for the amount of minutes that you need in your lawn. Okay, I've talked a lot and very fast. So I'll give you this slide. This has our website, williamson.agrilife.org, and that's our phone number. You can call. I'm happy to answer questions. And then the Master Gardener Help Desk is staffed with Master Gardener volunteers every Tuesday and Friday. It's actually 10 to 2. The hour is wrong on there. The other website, and I forgot to put it up there, I'll add it in the chat, is aggieturf.tamu.edu. And this is going to have a lot of publications about lawn care with a lot more details than I had time for tonight. But okay, I think at this point, Gary, I'm ready for questions. So
Okay, are there any in the chat? Let me see. Yeah, there's a couple in the chat if you want to start with those. And then what do you think we covered all those that were sent in prior? Hopefully.
Hopefully. I'm not sure. The one, I know there was one about leveling that came in, but I'll, Dave, I'm sorry. I wish I was on the Bermuda Islands, but we didn't get there. Someone asked if it's possible to get a copy of the presentation. I don't usually share presentations, but I'll give you something even better. The Aggie Turf website has a publication. It's like 20-something pages long on Bermuda grass management, and it's got everything that I talked about, but in more detail. And all those charts with the herbicide recommendations, those are in that publication. And so I'll send that out to you that you can email to the group.
And I also have recorded this as well, which I will send to the group. Okay,
perfect. Okay, top dressing to help level the lawn. Yes, you can do that. Dillo dirt would be good. Topsoil would probably be my next recommendation. I would use a soil, not a compost or peat moss, because compost, if it's doing its job right, it's going to be broken down and the nutrients are available, which is not a bad thing for a lawn either. But if you're trying to level it, I would use a soil. So just a topsoil, you can buy it in bags. You can use sand if you wanted to, but we don't have a lot of sand, so I would probably go with a topsoil bag and just fill in those holes. The one thing I would caution you with is if you've got many trees, we never want to add more than 1 inch of soil over the roots of trees. And that would be in a big area. You know, if you're talking about tiny little spots, it's not a big deal. But if you are trying to fill in a big area or make a big leveling, we don't want to add more than 1 inch of soil on top of tree roots, because it reduces the amount of oxygen that they have and you can suffocate those roots. Okay, what height do I recommend to mow the grass during the summer months? Okay, good question. I had a slide about mowing and I took it off. it kind of depends some on what type of grass. It sounds like everybody's got Bermuda, and I'm assuming maybe a hybrid Bermuda. Generally, those are a little shorter. You know, when we get into summer months, it can be helpful to let your grass grow a little bit taller, because more leaf growth on that is going to help it have better root growth down under the plant, which we need good root growth to help it live through dry times, right? To be able to access that water in the soil. And so 2.5 inches on Bermuda grass would be good. Okay, any other questions? Feel free to open up your mic.
I was going to say, yeah, let's go open Q&A and see what we can do. Come on, it's not gonna be that quiet.
Kate, I do have one question. Oops, wait a minute, lost it. Just a little clarification. You had spoken about you need to do, you know, deep waterings, just once or twice a week. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about doing short waterings,
yes,
you're still accomplishing that deepness.
So what we're doing when I say short waterings, so how long is your normal irrigation time?
Oh, mine's the biggest mess you've ever seen.
Okay,
so you don't gotta go by mine.
So say your zones were set for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think I'm probably right in there.
Okay, so what I would recommend is that on Monday, when you normally run your system, I'm just giving an example here. Right. Instead of running it straight for 10 minutes, you're going to run it for 5 minutes, run it through all the zones for 5 minutes, take a break for an hour or two.
An hour, okay. Yeah.
And then run it again for 5 minutes. So then you're still getting that full 10 minutes, but it's had time to soak down deeper into the soil.
Yeah, because I see a lot of runoff when I do mine. Yeah. I'm just watering the street.
Right. Yeah. So hopefully that will help relieve some of that runoff. Y'all are in such a tough spot because Sun City has no soil. I'm sorry for y'all. No. There's just not a lot of soil. It's a lot of rock. I know when they come in and they put in topsoil, it's not always the best kind of soil.
It's a whole ½ inch, if that.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, do what you can. You might not be able to get away with watering 1 day a week. You probably can't, just because your soil is so shallow. So, you know, go for two days a week, but that cycle soak hopefully will help you get deeper.
All right. And now I know that it was recommended to me by my lawn care company to do 2 waterings a day in the hot summer days, but they set that at like 9 o'clock at night. Do you recommend that?
You know, in the hot summer days, it's not as much of an issue because our nighttime temperatures don't get that.
They're still warm.
Yeah, they're still pretty warm, but I would still recommend, it's better for the grass to water in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
and
right.
You can do it, you know, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning if you wanted to. But
that's where I think, yeah.
Kate, what are the advantages and disadvantages of using Dillo dirt?
So Dillo dirt it's got some great nutrients in it. Well, let me back up. What to put on your turf? Is that what you're okay? As a compost layer of nutrients. So I would recommend it. I would put out about 1/4 inch probably on your lawn across there. I don't know how you're putting it out. I don't see anything wrong with it. I like Dillo dirt. It's a good source of nutrients. It may not be enough nitrogen for your lawn. You may need to supplement it with some other nitrogen. I can't remember. I bought some Dillo dirt recently and I can't remember if it had the nutrient analysis on it. Are you familiar with those 3 numbers? The NPK, they're separated with dashes. So that first number is going to tell you how much nitrogen. And I think Dillo dirt, a lot of our composts, they're just not very high in nitrogen. they're a good source of it. I highly recommend them because they also add organic matter into the soil. So it's going to help build up the soil quality,
Mhm.
but they're just not a lot of nitrogen.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Anybody
Kate, I
else?
have a question.
Yes.
Do you recommend
Overseeding. That was a question I got and I didn't. It kind of depends on what you're looking for in your lawn. Typically, we overseed with some sort of a ryegrass so that we have a green lawn in the winter. The challenge is that it can be a little bit difficult to get rid of that ryegrass when our Bermuda grass is trying to green up. And so it can slow down that green up. So it's personal preference. I have never overseeded. I really have no interest in it, partly because I don't want to have to mow in the wintertime. That's my break. And I don't want to have to mess with it in the spring when my Bermuda grass is trying to green up. I suppose if you scalp your lawn, that would help take care of that, get rid of that ryegrass and help your lawn to green up quickly. But I don't think it's worth the hassle, but that's my personal opinion. Oh, I think you're muted.
No, any other questions? I can't believe you're gonna get off this easy.
I know.
So
what about
there you go.
bagging when you
Oh,
mow?
bagging when you mow. No, I do not recommend bagging your grass clippings. Those have a lot of
Get that?
nutrient. Oh, I don't know if I'm talking over you. Okay. I do not recommend bagging your grass clippings. They've got a lot of nutrients, a lot of organic matter. It's better to put those back into the soil. They can actually replace, like, I think 50 to 60% of the nitrogen that your lawn needs. So just let those clippings stay in the lawn.
Have you heard of a product called Milo Organics?
Milo Organics,
Yeah.
no.
Okay, I've used it several times. I think it's kind of a nitrogen supplement, but whatever it is, it does not need to be watered in. It'll just take water when it gets it.
Okay.
And it is an organic product,
Okay.
but okay, if you don't, that's great.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that one.
Okay.
There's a question, if you have thin spots, is it better to put sod or seed? Man, let me give my favorite answer. It depends. My first question would be, why do you have thin spots? What's the cause of that? Is it a disease issue? Is it a shade problem? If you've got very much shade at all, Bermuda grass likes full sun. So if you've got shade trees, that may be the cause of your thin spots, in which case you're not going to be able to grow Bermuda grass there in the shade. So give it up, do something else. Higher traffic right off the back porch. It's going to be tough. Bermuda grass is our most traffic tolerant grass. It tends to do the best, but if you're walking on it or if a pet is walking on it all the time, it's really going to struggle. What happens is that the soil gets really compacted and it's just hard for those roots to have oxygen to grow. So, if it's a high traffic area that you're not going to be able to stay off of, you might look at putting some stepping stones or a pathway in. If it's an area that you think you can stay off of, you could do some aeration to open that soil back up, and you might be able to, once you can reduce the traffic, the grass around it should fill it back in. So Bermuda grass is a blessing and a curse because it will fill back in very quickly. It puts off those rhizomes and stolons. So it's got grass that spreads above ground, and then those roots spread below ground through the rhizomes. And so it comes back really quickly, which is nice until you're trying to keep it out of a flower bed. So I don't know if I answered your question very well, but okay, let me go. There's one under about soil test kits. So if you go to the website soiltesting.tamu.edu, all the information there, forms on there for how to do a soil test. You'll use the urban soil submittal form. So that'll get you for lawn care. And what we recommend is that you'll take 8 to 10 small sub samples from all over your lawn. We're going to spread those out. You want to get 6 inches deep worth of soil. So you might have to use the shovel, get a good slice of soil. Don't just get right at the top, because we want to know the nutrients all the way down. You'll take your 8 to 10 samples, put them in a bucket, clean out all the grass and stuff, let that soil dry out, and then take 2 cups and put it in a double bag it in like Ziploc or whatever, and you mail that to the lab at A&M and let them know what kind of grass you have and what you're doing, and they'll give you results back. It's $12 for the basic test, so it's not very expensive, but I'll send you that information. Next question was, what type of Bermuda grass will grow under cedar elm trees? It won't. If you've got very much shade at all, you're not going to be able to grow Bermuda grass. I say that there's research being done on more shade tolerant varieties of Bermuda grass, but it's just going to be pretty tricky. So if you're right underneath your trees, I might suggest that you look at some sort of landscape bed with some ground covers or something that would handle more shade. Bermuda grass just doesn't like it.
I think you wore them out.
Okay.
Hey, Kate, this is George Hartz. I'm the
Yes.
water ambassador.
Mhm.
And
Great.
what I've seen so far this year from everyone moving in with new homes is that the sprinkler timers have been set by the contractor originally, and most of them are way off. So nobody knows exactly what's happening with their watering. So that's something that everyone needs to do, is go out there and physically turn on each zone, see how long it waters, check for runoff, so on.
Mhm.
And the type of sprinklers that everyone has. Now, a lot of us have, between the lots is standard just spray sprinkler. But if we have a bigger lot, you have the multi-stream sprinklers, which means they put out streams and it takes a lot more water to water the same amount of area.
Mhm.
So, those will be on for a longer period of time. But what I've seen is what you said in your presentation is do it shorter periods of time, let it soak in, wait an hour, turn it back on again. And so, this summer I did it several times a day, like 2 or 3 times a day.
Mhm.
That seemed to work out the best.
Mhm. Good.
But the multi-stream sprinklers, of course, you want to go longer.
Mhm. Yep. You might need to have a workshop if you need to change those out.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be good. Well, I'm glad you're on, George. I think I signed you up for a whole lot of work.
No, it's been fun, because everyone's learning as they're doing it. So,
Yep.
and understanding their yards and everything. And the same thing with the fertilizer. I mean, we've all were just not proactive. We were reactive this last year.
Mhm.
So, grass is turning yellow, it's turning brown. Everyone thinks it's fertilizer. So, I mean, you've taught us a lot so far. So it's been good.
Good.
Yeah.
Great. Well, y'all will stay busy. The water town hall that the water ambassadors normally do, hopefully that'll be rescheduled for later in the spring. But that's always a good good thing too. If y'all have ever been to that, I recommend it.
We had a lot of problems this summer when it got up to 110 plus
Mhm.
with grass, burning
Yeah.
and not getting enough water. What do you recommend for that?
Well, most people don't like my answer, but brown is a good color and it's okay to have a brown lawn.
Mhm.
Grass will go dormant in the summer, Bermuda grass especially. It goes dormant. It does a great job. And it comes back once we start getting rain in the fall. And so, it's funny, we've been promoting right now after the freeze. We have a hashtag on Facebook that says, "Show me you're ugly." It's okay sometimes if plants look ugly. And so when it gets that blistering hot, our lawns, we just can't keep enough water on. Well, let me rephrase that. We can keep enough water on them, but it's not prudent for us to put that much water on our lawns. And so, you might increase it a little bit if that water is available. Watching the city water restrictions is going to be really important. But other than that, just get used to having a nice golden lawn for a little bit and it'll be fine. The rain comes back.
But a lot of us got really big bare spots during that period. Again, just let it, I didn't do anything special and I just let it fill itself in and it finally did in the fall. So
Yeah.
is that normal?
Yep, it will. It'll come back. Y'all are going to have more of a challenge because you have such rocky soil. And so if there's a rock 2 inches underneath your lawn in the 100 degrees, you're not going to be able to put enough water on to keep that green. So just, it's hard to watch it get that yellow and brown, but it'll come back. The great thing about Bermuda grass is that it does come back so well from drought. And then even in spots where it dies, it fills in so quickly. So it'll be fine.
Well, Kate, for the entire neighborhood, I want to thank you ever so much for your presentation. I think we could keep you on here till midnight. But I don't think that would be prudent as well.
Yeah.
So any last parting words? I know I will have the recording. You're going to send a couple of informational sheets that I can share with the group.
Yes, absolutely. And feel free to reach out. Our office, the Master Gardeners, and are glad to help answer questions if you have some trouble come up. But I'll send those resources out. Thank y'all so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, Kate. Have a great evening. Stay safe.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.